I'm a single man who lives alone in Denver. My apartment complex is not what you would call a nice building. I'm on a road close to Colfax Avenue, which, if you're familiar with the geography of this area, is not the safest boulevard in town. I'm a few streets away from it, but close enough that I wouldn't consider this an up-and-coming neighborhood. This evening I was watching Netflix on my couch. My two cats were cuddled up against me as I lay under a comforter. The night before I had watched a horror movie that was scary enough to leave me in an unsettled mood, making it harder to sleep. So this night I decided to watch a stand-up special instead. Keep it light so I wouldn't have any trouble getting some shut-eye. I have classes early the next morning, so I was surprised when I made the conscious decision to turn on a second stand-up special and let myself fall asleep on the couch. I was just so comfy where I was laying and didn't want to move, not even to turn off the several lights throughout my apartment. I remember dozing off around 11 o'clock. It was effortless, which meant I was really snug under the covers with my cats, flanking me on either end, creating a tucked-in feeling. I fell into a dream wherein I was on an impromptu date with this guy whom I didn't recognize at a Blockbuster video store. He bought me blue and yellow underwear, like a Blockbuster would sell in Dreamland, insinuating I would take the hint of his intentions. He was also desperate for a job, so when we got to the counter, he was given an off-the-cuff interview that didn't go well. And all of a sudden, I'm not sleeping anymore. I'm woken up by a knock at my door. Then a man's voice says, "Maintenance." I just sat there, sitting bolt upright, on my couch. I knew something was wrong. I looked at my phone, which was by my left hand, and the time was 2:15 a.m. I didn't move. The floors in my apartment are old wood, and there are many creaky floorboards. I didn't want whoever was knocking to know somebody was at home and awake, let alone alert to his presence. My cats got up and ran over to the door as they normally would, but I stayed still and listened. After a few minutes with no answer, the man walked away from the door and down the hallway to the stairs. A moment after that, I heard the back door to the building swing open and close. I have one window where I have a partial view of that door, so I break my paralysis and race over to it. I saw an old-looking green SUV sitting in the no parking zone just in front of the back door. It must have been running the entire time because I didn't hear it start up, and the brake lights were glowing red. Someone, presumably the maintenance man, got in the car and it drove off. I don't know what his intentions were, but nobody knocks on someone's door at 2:15 a.m., claiming to work with a landlord with good deeds in mind. Had it been a true emergency, wouldn't he have knocked again? Used his service key to get into the unit? What did I just avoid here? I can only assume it was an attempted robbery at best or abduction at worst. When I was watching the SUV drive off, I surveyed the other apartment windows. They were all dark. I can see every unit except the other two corner apartments below me from that vantage point. I think because my apartment sticks out from the building and has so many windows, I was targeted because my lights were visibly on and noticeable from the street. However, I don't know how this individual got into the building in the first place, as you would need a key to do so. I've never been so legitimately afraid as a single person living alone. I'm grateful that I installed the security chain on my door when I moved in, and I'm also glad that even in my disoriented state, I had the presence of mind not to move from the couch or make any noise. As I recount the event, I can't stop my eyes from leaking tears, though I wouldn't call it crying. My nerves are definitely shot. I don't think I'll be going back to Dreamland anytime soon. I've turned off all the lights save for the lamp by my bed. I usually can't sleep with it on, but tonight I don't think I could sleep with it off. Since my last post here was received so well, I thought I might share some other experiences I've had over the years. It is most unfortunate that my life has been full of creeps and weirdos. First, a disclaimer. This post is marked as not safe for work for a reason. It has some language and some events that are a bit, well, let's just to say, this isn't a story I would tell in church. Also, as this post involves hitchhiking, I realize that somebody out there will surely comment, well, hitchhiking is dangerous. Obviously, I am fully aware of this and you will soon find out. So, now that is out of the way, it was around 2004. I decided I'd had enough of the bitter cold Rocky Mountain winters. I'd spent most of my time since I was around 16, listening almost exclusively to Jimmy Buffett music. Except for small breaks to listen to things like Journey's greatest hits, he was pretty much my entire musical life. I would listen to him talk about these far-off places and these great adventures and weird characters that he'd come across. I read his books, which talked about pretty much the same thing. I read interviews where, you guessed it, he talked about pretty much the same thing. So my young 22-year-old brain was filled with these ideas that adventure was out there waiting for me, that all I had to do was go and find it. Why was I rotting away in a frozen hell when there was so much more to see in tropical climates? And it is thinking that led me to pack everything I owned and stick my thumb out on the interstate. I was headed for Mobile, Alabama, which is Jimmy's hometown. Then I was headed for Florida, where most of his songs are based. Then, well, the possibilities seemed endless. Maybe find work on a boat in exchange for passage to some place like Jamaica. You can go ahead and laugh at me. It's been about 17 years, so wisdom and life experience have allowed me to see clearly how stupid I was for all of this. I can take the ribbing. I've been getting grief over it for the better part of 2 decades. More on that later. My journey took me through Texas and Arkansas. There are many funny stories along this journey, like the time I was picked up in the desert by an old guy named Buddy in a hippie van. However, those stories are not the focus here because they aren't very creepy and are not the focus. Along the way, I also passed through Fouke, Arkansas, and learned about the Fouke monster. Fascinating little bit of folklore, actually. There's a fairly detailed Wikipedia article on the subject if you are interested. So anyway, my journey took me down to South Louisiana and Interstate 10. When you head down the section of highway between Lafayette and Baton Rouge, you have to pass over the Atchafalaya Basin, which means crossing over 18 miles of swampland via bridge. According to Wikipedia, this bridge is the 3rd longest in the US, the 2nd longest in the United States interstate system, and the 14th longest in the world. That's a lot of bridge. And the shoulder? Virtually non-existent. From what I have been told, police are quick to nab anyone foolish enough to try crossing this bridge on foot. So I was stuck. For hours. On the Lafayette side of the bridge, attempting to thumb a ride across. Eventually I was successful, and this is where things take an unsettling turn. A white van pulled up. When the door opened, there was nobody in the vehicle but an old man. He looked to be in his late 60s or early 70s. Quite obese and wearing nothing but a pair of shorts. I climbed in and thanked him for stopping. As we took off, When the Sun Goes Down by Kenny Chesney was playing on the radio. Due to the events that followed, I have forever lost any liking I had for the song. We were headed across this massive bridge with nowhere to stop and nowhere for me to go. The man started looking at me like a dog might look at a particularly meaty bone. It was making me uneasy already. "Hey boy," he said in a thick Cajun accent. "Got a big dick?" "Excuse me?" I asked. I looked back at him and then out the window of the moving vehicle. No escape route. "I bet it's pretty big," he said, smiling at me. I really don't want to discuss that," I said. "Nothing but guardrail on the right and swampland below that. Jumping out would be deadly." "I'd sure like to see it," he said. "Well, I don't think so," I replied. What I was thinking, actually, was, you can wish in one hand and crap in the other and see which one fills up the cup first. Undeterred, the man went on. "I'd sure like to take you into the swamp." Aw, man. If I'd once thought, and I can't remember if I actually did, that this situation couldn't get worse, I would have been so incredibly mistaken. "Nah, I don't think so," I repeated. "Ah, come on, boy," he insisted. "It'd only take about 30 minutes. Please understand that I'm making his English clear for those reading, but it was thick and Cajun, as I've said before, so it was more like it only takes about 30 minutes, which made it way creepier. At this point, the man had asked to see my genitals and had expressed his desire to take me into the swamps. I couldn't help but wonder if he was even going to give me a choice or if he was just going to take me there by force. If he did, I would be virtually helpless. I wasn't from here and didn't know the area. I certainly didn't know the layout of the swamps. I would have been at his mercy for him to do with me as he pleased. And whatever it was that he pleased with took a lot of forms in my mind. Would he take me somewhere and assault me and then feed me to the alligators? Would he hold me prisoner and torture me before killing me and feeding me to the alligators? Or would he just kill me immediately and feed me to them? For some reason, every scenario involved alligators. "I don't want to go into the swamp with you." "No," I said, as firmly as my overwhelming fear would allow. As I am here today writing this, it goes without saying that I didn't end up as gator bait. He didn't take me forcefully into the swamps, and he didn't do anything to me physically. Psychologically, however, his terrifying comments were torture as the bridge went on and on and on for what seemed like forever. When we finally reached the other side and he let me out, I thanked him for the ride as politely as I could manage. When he pulled away, I could have fallen down and kissed the ground. I was safe and I was alive, not dead. My journey continued for several days until I ultimately ended up in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. There was another incident before I got there where I was picked up in Walker, Louisiana, by a man who wasn't so much creepy as he was potentially dangerous. By the time I ran into him, I was physically exhausted and dirty and hadn't had decent rest in days. When he and his wife offered to let me stay in their guest room for the night, I was so grateful to not have slept in the woods or in a ditch along the side of the road or in the back booth of some diner that I took them up on. Desperation and exhaustion will cloud a person's thinking, that's for sure. As we pulled away, he said, in a genuinely friendly tone, that I was welcome at his home and that he wasn't dangerous. I genuinely believed him until he pulled a gun out from between the seats and warned me that I'd better not be dangerous either. Oh boy. Why did I still go with him? Exhaustion and desperation, like I said. So I'm in the guest room of this trailer in a comfortable bed for the first time in. I'm pretty sure a couple of weeks. I'm relaxing there when his sister comes over. I don't see them being in a bedroom, but I hear them in the living room. She's upset about something, and that's all she keeps talking about. Finally, I hear the man get fed up and snap, screaming at her, and then I hear a gunshot. No way. There are several seconds there where I'm again terrified of what's about to happen to me. This man just shot his sister, and I'm here in the house with him, potential witness. I look up at the window, wondering if I can fit through it and escape. I cannot. Then I hear her speak up. He shot a hole in the ceiling. So apparently he hadn't shot his sister. He was just a trigger-happy lunatic who had shot around into the ceiling to emphasize his frustration. To be fair, they were actually very nice people. After the commotion, I ended up staying overnight anyway. Call me stupid if you like, I was that tired. And his wife took me back to the interstate in the morning. We had a nice conversation along the way. Wouldn't stay there again though, ever. 1-star rating for sure. But my hosts were very polite to me. When I got to Bay St. Louis, I ended up getting picked up by a lady who lived in Mobile, Alabama, who ended up taking me in, and she is my foster mother to this day. I love her to death. This horrific trip ended with me finding a new life and a new family. So there's a silver lining to every dark cloud, I suppose. Her husband, who is my foster father, has never stopped giving me grief about any of this. In almost 20 years, he's never tired of it. He especially liked to rip on Jimmy Buffett, an artist he despises, and he refers to him as Jimmy Buttplug for some reason. Did I learn anything from this? Well, if you're asking if I learned not to hitchhike, no. I went on several more journeys over the years before I finally decided that I'd had enough, adventure. Somebody will surely think I'm stupid for this. Young people do tend to be stupid, so no argument here. If you need any further proof of this, watch MTV's coverage of spring break sometime. Watch how dumb some of these young people act as they party on the beach. As a word of advice to those who might be considering hitchhiking, probably just don't. You can meet a lot of interesting people, you can have a lot of positive experiences, but you can also end up getting picked up by a maniac. And you might not be as lucky as I was. I'm a man in my 20s that lives alone on the very top floor of an apartment block. I've had short hair for the last 10 years of my life. The longest hair on my head is maybe an inch long, if that even. However, across my house I keep finding long hairs on the floor, like long brunette hairs, at least 5 or 6 inches, sometimes longer, and they would be everywhere. Bathroom floor, in the shower, in my cupboard, in my kitchen, on old clothes, living room floor and sofas. I've been single since November and clean often enough that I'm certain it's not my ex-girlfriend's hair. Plus, the color doesn't match anyway. She had solid black hair. These are more a light brunette. Plus, finding them in places like the shower. Where is running water hitting all the sides 5+ times a week? Anyways, I waved it off as well. I work with a lot of people and use the gym and bus sometimes, so naturally hairs are going to stick to my clothes. Well, one day this past April, I finished my early AM gym session and got the call that I didn't have to go to work that day. So naturally, I started to walk home all happy that I had the day to myself. I'm on the 5th floor, the uppermost floor of the building, and the apartment is in such a way that there is only one apartment per floor. I start to hustle up the stairs and don't use the elevator since I'm sweaty from the gym already. Just as I whip a right to go up the last set of stairs from the 4th floor to the 5th, I see my neighbors on the 3rd floor, daughter coming down the stairs. We lock eyes. We have never spoken before, mostly because we've never had a reason to, but also because out of respect, I didn't want to make her uncomfortable since she's like 19 to 21-ish, and I'm slightly older. The most interaction we've had is that I've spoken to her mother and father before when bumping into each other on the stairs, but not to her. I gave a confused hello. At this point I'm thinking that maybe she went to knock on my door to ask for something. A cup of sugar maybe? I don't know. I was expecting her to reply with something like, "Oh, hi, do you have any XYZ? You know, this or that?" Nope. She gave me a silent hey and brushed right past me. And only then, when the smell of my own shampoo hit me, did I notice her hair was wet. Like fresh out of the shower a minute ago wet. Now, I'm not saying she showered in my house or that I have a stalker that's been living in my house while I've been at work. He very easily could have just been there to ask for something, and the most generic brand shampoo smelled the same. But don't the pieces all fit together a bit too well? Her hair color matches the hairs I would find around my apartment, and like I said before, they were everywhere. In my bed too, and in my sock drawers. And if it is a case of me having a stalker, how did she know I came home early enough to bolt out of the shower in time? Our apartment doesn't have cameras. It's an older building from before 2000, and why would she be stalking me? For how long has she been doing this? We've never dated or had a proper conversation. I saw her maybe 20 times in the past 2 years, given that I work and she presumably studies or works too. All of these thoughts are buzzing through my head. I'm standing outside my door for a solid 2 minutes, grappling with what just happened. I go to turn the key to my door and it opens without me having to unlock it. And I know for a fact I always double lock my door. It's the type with a lock near waist level and a second more secure lock with a different key around shoulder level. I drop my bag, throw off my shoes, and run to the shower. And you guessed it, it's wet. I hadn't showered since yesterday morning. I'm a confrontational person. Not that I go looking for fights or anything, but I'll definitely pursue an answer if something is bugging me. So back down the stairs to the 3rd floor I went and knocked on the door of my apparent stalker and her family. She opens the door but with the chain still on. I see half of her face from behind the door. Yes? Can I help? Were you at my door or inside? I don't want to make this a police thing now, but you came down the stairs just now and I know you were inside. I just had to get something. It won't happen again. Okay. Bye, see ya. Door closed. This happened last month. I've been cleaning my house every weekend closely now and got the locks changed and put a motion sensor camera above my door. It only films and triggers on the steps coming up to my door, so the 4th apartment still has its privacy. So far so good. I don't think she's been inside since this. But looking back, I think she'd been living in or going into or whatever my apartment since January, because that's my earliest memory of finding hairs. She never took anything of value like my laptop or the few watches I have. Seemingly, she just showered and ate some of my food and lay in my bed. I do now also always take the elevator and avoid the 3rd floor like the plague. I have a bad habit of walking alone at night. I love it. I know it's not the best plan, as a small woman especially, but it is one of those things that just gives me joy. Speaks to my soul, I guess. As cheesy as it sounds. I do carry pepper spray and keep my phone in my hand. Man, hell if I'll let fear ruin something I love. Summer nights are the best. The light lingers forever in the Pacific Northwest. You get these endless twilights and there's this beautiful breath of coolness coming out of the dense screen, even when it's hot in the daytime. I lived in the desert as a teenager and I still just love the cool silky feeling air here. Silly, but I do. Soaking up the night air is amazing. I live in a small town at the head of a very long rural trail that winds through lowland marshy areas, dense woods and fields, and at night it is silent and isolated. 99.9% of the time, nobody is out there in the night except me, bats, and the rare bicyclist. Once you get outside city limits about a mile, a small town is small. There's nobody to mess with, so there's nobody looking to mess with you, if you get what I'm saying. The only houses are sparse and far across ravines and fields covered with blackberry cane with no streetlights, and no easy exit from the trail. I put one headphone in. I keep one out for me as a Zapata to date myself, and I walk for hours and miles. I usually take a big crossbody purse with a water bottle, my ID, a little bit of cash, and start to walk while the light leaves the sky. I only use my phone light when it gets pitch dark and absolutely necessary. This night I was far out into the boonies, just me and the maple trees kissing over the trail, and it was fully dark. Really deep dark by then, and I'm cruising along listening to a podcast in one ear with my little phone light. Beautiful night still. I'm just soaking it in, and I have been out here for a few hours and heading back, but still some miles out. Suddenly, there's this extra black patch, like a big splotch resolving itself out of the dense shadows across the trail. It took me a second to realize, oh yeah, that's not a trick of the light, it's actually something. It's a big black mass all across the trail in front of me. Not moving, but it's blocking the trail. I start getting the creeps. Chills. This is not normal, yet it's between me and home. There's no other choice, so I slowly creep up to whatever it is, a black puddle. Then as I get close, I see blood smeared. Not a lot, but man, there are traces of blood on the paved trail. I put the big girl panties on and walked close. Phone cued to 911. The shadow resolved itself into a dude in a big flappy black coat, sprawled across the whole trail, surrounded by small bloodstains. So, I say, "Hey man, are you alright?" In surprise, the guy sits up. He's sunburnt and grimy but coherent, and kind of chipper. He goes, "Yeah, I'm okay, just resting. Hey, you got any water?" I forked over my water bottle and told him to go ahead and keep it. He took it and thanked me. He had scraped his bare foot and wandered around for a bit before deciding to take a breather, which was what the blood was from. I recognized him. He's a local meth head and drunk. He's either slightly drunk and kind of peaceful or belligerent on meth. Today, he was sobering up and tired. I asked him if I could call anyone, like 911 or whatever. Nope, just chilling. I carefully skirted around him and headed back home. I did not have particularly warm and cozy feelings about him, having hosed his puke off my porch a couple of times and have been called the "see you next Tuesday" word more than once by him. So, I left it at that. Anyway, a few months later, he attacked a random tourist with a machete downtown in broad daylight, sliced their leg open and went to prison. The first thing I'm going to say is that this is totally real, and I was freaked out of my wits for days. I don't think I could make some of this stuff up. Everybody I tell it to says that it is terrifying, and after reading through some of the stories on the subreddit, I think it would be a good fit. It was February of 2014. This thing I was doing at work kind of came to a head all at once, and I was basically going to have to spend the entire weekend writing a press release that was needed the following Monday by 10 a.m. Now, my grandparents own some property way out in the boonies of East Texas. I grew up going out there all the time for family get-togethers and whatnot. Now, since it was only a 45-minute drive away from where I lived, I would go out there with friends to camp and party, whatever. Well, I knew I was going to be riding all weekend. I thought, why not spend it in the great outdoors instead of holed up in my apartment in Houston? I had never stayed out there by myself, but had always been keen on the idea and thought this would be an excellent time to do it. I called my granddad asking if it would be okay for me to use the place for the weekend, and he said of course. He did seem a little reluctant about me doing it alone, but I was a 24-year-old guy who had grown up hiking and felt totally competent to handle anything that might happen. Honestly, at the time, I was a little bit insulted when he seemed to think me going out there by myself was not the best idea. He made sure I knew how to turn on the electricity and water. We use a well for water and have a big switch that turns on and off the electricity out there, which of course I did. I'd only done it a million times when I brought friends. He asked if I had a key, which again, of course, I did. Finally, he said, "You know where I keep the Henry, right?" My granddad is kind of a cowboy and keeps a big 30-30 Henry repeater out there mainly for shooting whitetail. But you never know. "Yeah," I said, admittedly for the first time. Nervous since, to my knowledge, he was the only one who had ever stayed out there by himself, and he had never really talked to me about his guns. The only shooting I had done out there was with a pellet gun as a kid, and then a camera as I got older. The drive out was nice after I got out of the city. I left work at 4:30, already packed, and drove straight there. With traffic, frickin' Houston. I made it out there by about 6:45. Still light outside, but it was beginning to turn to dusk. I took my duffel bag out of the trunk and went inside. The house is more like a small resort than a ranch house. It's really nice, which is why I enjoy talking to people out there so much. My granddad was pretty well off and had the place built when he retired. It has 12 bedrooms, and I choose the upstairs sort of master bedroom if you can call it that. I unpacked, sat on the bed, and opened my laptop to look at what I had to write and immediately closed it. Screw that, I thought. I'll work on that tomorrow. Now I want to take a walk. There is a trail that goes in a big circle around the perimeter of the property and is about 3.5 miles. It was dark out now, and the thought briefly crossed my mind to bring my granddad's gun, but I decided on his 35-foot wooden dowel instead so I could have a walking stick and wouldn't slip in the dark and shoot my foot off or something. I put on a hoodie, grabbed a flashlight, and started off. It was a clear moonless night, and the swath of the Milky Way across the sky was impressive, but it was still really dark out. I didn't use my flashlight so my eyes would adjust, and after about 10 or so minutes, I could see reasonably well. It was nice. Chilly, but nice. After about a mile and a half, I decided to cut the route short through the woods and head back. I know the land so well that I could easily get back to the house from any point on the property. The woods and brush were pretty dense, though, and I was forced to turn on the flashlight. A thick wall of twigs and vines is revealed. I push through it with my stick, getting a couple of scratches when I see something deeper in the woods, partially obscured by the underbrush. It looks like somebody left a pile of clothes in the woods. I keep the light trained on it for a second or two, trying to see what it is. Suddenly, it jumps up really fast and sprints away further into the forest. My heart is in my throat and my stomach does a somersault. I feel the pins and needles of an adrenaline surge all over. With all the force I can muster, I try to shout, "Who is that?" But I have no idea what it actually sounded like. Immediately, I regretted not having that rifle, but heck, I even left my cell phone on the bed. The worst part of it is, whoever that guy was took off in the direction of the house, and I can't remember if I locked the door. Now that the initial shock began to wear off, the real fear begins. It is suddenly very cold. Never before have I felt so violated and stupid. I should have never come out here totally by myself. This guy shoots at me or something. Nobody will even miss me until Monday. Okay, get a hold of yourself. You need to get your phone. I walk a mile through the woods terrified. The woods end about 150 yards from the house's front patio, and I basically sprint it. Now, for any of you who have been in a situation like this, you know that running does not help. You feel that gut-wrenching panic, getting a foothold, and constantly think something is right on your heels. When I get to the front door in this semi-sane state, I am in for another shock since the door is cracked open and I can't remember if I did it or not. I have to go inside. I push the door open, holding the dowel sort of like a baseball bat, and immediately hear shrieking coming from the living room. I don't think I have ever been as close to blind terror as I was at that moment. I would not have been able to speak. A strangled noise escaped my throat, but I was hardly aware of it. I sprinted up the stairs and into the room where my stuff is, at every turn expecting to see some horrific rotted corpse shrieking at me. I don't know why, but at that moment, that is exactly what I thought I would see. I slam the door behind me and hear the scream again, from directly below me this time. I run into the bathroom and dial the police, locking the door and hiding in the shower. In retrospect, this seems like a really bitchy thing to do, but every ounce of bravado I had was long since strained. I tried to describe what was happening on the phone, but I'm not sure how much sense it made. There is a little town about 9 miles away from our property, and that is where the nearest police station is. It took them, I would say, 20 minutes to arrive, during which I heard the scream one more time. It was a lower pitch now and sounded strangled. Then came the freaking flashing red and blue lights through the window. I was still in the shower when I heard a man shout, "Please, anyone here? Come out." I got up and opened the bathroom door and heard a voice downstairs. Shit, Evans called an ambulance. I opened the bedroom door and a cop down the hall has a gun on me, saying, "Freeze." I try to explain that this is my family's place and I am the caller, but they still handcuff me. I soon see why. In the living room is the man I saw in the woods on his back, staring blankly upward, one arm outstretched at the ceiling and the other bent but still reaching upward. His head was lying in a pool of blood. We eventually get it cleared up who is who, and that I didn't crack that guy over the head with anything. Later, I find out that this guy was a paranoid schizophrenic, probably a homeless man who had wandered onto our property. It's hard to tell from where. We still don't know why he was bleeding, blunt force trauma of some sort, maybe a fall. So, insane dude. He basically gave me like 3 heart attacks, so let's not meet. And I'm pretty sure if it was my granddad instead of me out there, he could have gotten shot. I did, however, get the press release done by Monday. When I was 6 or 7, I had an awesome best friend who lived in the apartment complex right across from me. She and I used to go roving around on adventures, helping the older folks in the complex get around. It was the 90s in a small town, so our hard-working single moms didn't worry too much if we got off the bus before they got off work. They told us to always stick together no matter what, not talk to strangers, and stay close to the section of the complex that we lived in. And never go to the playground at the top of the hill by ourselves. Naturally, being 6 or 7 years old and 8 or 9, We were pretty obedient until one day when they were way louder than usual. We were bored out of our tiny noggins and thought it would be a brilliant idea to hike the massive hill and go play on the playground. So up we went and all was well. At least for a few minutes. My spidey senses started tingling, and when I turned around, there was a man standing there. He didn't look creepy or anything to me. Just a normal younger dude wearing a burgundy sweater and khakis. I looked around to see if he had brought his kids up or something, but I didn't see any. I grabbed the swing that I had been pushing my friend down and made it stop, whispering to her that there was a man behind us. She looked behind us and stood up quickly. "It's okay. You two can keep playing," he said in a very soft, quiet voice. My friend spoke up. "Nah, we were just leaving anyways." She grabbed my hand and we began to walk away. "If you want, I have a jungle gym across from my apartment and we can go play there," he said, moving closer to us. We backed away, still hand in hand, both of our red flag sensors going wild. "I like watching you two play. You are very pretty," he continued, moving in longer strides. Needless to say, we booked it. Taking off down the hill at breakneck kid speed, we looked behind us to see him chasing us, and we both started screaming. A little more than halfway down the hill, we saw both of our moms standing by their cars, talking and smoking yet. When they heard us, they immediately started sprinting to us. Apparently, the man realized who they were, and he started taking off across the vast parking lot back to his apartment. Our mom scolded us something fierce and explained to us that what happened was the exact reason we were never supposed to go that far from our neighbors ever again. So this just happened moments ago. I had just finished one of my classes at university for the day and was on my way to another when all of a sudden I was stopped by this random guy. He had told me he saw me around my building a few times and just had to introduce himself, so he did. And I stupidly said my first name, which I regret. Then he started saying how I looked nice today, and since he kept magically seeing me around, it must be fate, and he wanted to ask me out. I said no and that I was a lesbian and only liked girls. He then proceeded to ask how lesbians work because he was from a place where it was considered taboo. He then even creepily said, so even if we went at it, implying sex, I wouldn't even have to stick it in. I'd do as a lesbian does. As if that were the same. I said no, not the same at all, and tried to end it at that because I was thoroughly disturbed he would just assume that I'd have sex with him in the first place. Then he carried on with saying, I'm from Dubai. I am rich and have money. Can you be what Americans call a sugar baby? And kept pushing those types of things to get me to somehow be interested. Finally, he started to get the message that I wasn't going to agree to anything that he wanted and said, if I see you a fifth time, we're destined to get married. In a joking tone, but it still came off creepy. Once he walked away, I felt so disturbed and wondered how he saw me so often when our classes had only just started and how he lacked any social clues or understanding that what he asked wasn't okay. I'm really hoping I don't bump into him again. I'm making this short for a plethora of reasons. I was 22 at the time. I was a full-time model and also working for a writer and intelligent man who I looked up to and respected greatly. In fact, I looked at him as a father figure who would always protect me and have my best interest at heart. But that was not the case, unfortunately. He was a pioneer in something regarding computers, a photographer, and many other things. Now, the first 2 years I worked as his personal assistant, things were fine. He was definitely odd, but I like weird people because I'm weird myself. I learned a lot from working for him. That time period in my life is a combination of a David Lynch movie, a fever dream, a Lana Del Rey record, and isolation. So let's just get right into the night I still have nightmares about. My boss and I were working in his country house in upstate New York. This wasn't out of the ordinary at all. We went up there to work on his book and for me to do research and put together files, organize, etc. I had my own room and the place was gorgeous. It was completely desolate and eerie at the same time, but again, I felt safe with him and enjoyed being up there until this one night. I had a photo shoot the next morning in Connecticut where my boss would be driving me and his friend was the photographer and he claimed he had business to do with Lewis, the photographer. We worked all day the night prior to my shoot. When evening came around, my boss and I smoked a joint or three and talked. I had a couple of drinks and so did he. I decided to have one more cigarette before going to my bedroom. His bedroom was on the top floor and mine was next to the front door. In the first bedroom to the left across from my room was my boss's office, where he would often be writing his books. He was a night owl and got a lot of writing done at night. I was starting to doze off when I saw a light coming from the bottom of my door, so I figured the boss went to go work in his office across from my room, which startled me. I heard him talking to someone and I assumed he couldn't sleep, so he went to his office to write. I heard a strange old song playing on his record player. I thought this was odd. I cracked my door open a bit and saw my boss in my pink dress. Couldn't believe what I was seeing. My life has always been weird, but this one took the cake. He was dancing in my dress and talking to himself. I heard him say, "I am," and then he was saying my stage name in different creepy tones. That is extremely weird. He had bright red lipstick on, and suddenly he dropped to the floor, which scared the living shit out of me and made me gasp and cover my mouth. I put my hand over my mouth to avoid making any sound. He lay face down on his stomach and started humping the ground. This is when I got so freaked out I shut the door and locked it. I softly walked back in my bed and pulled the covers up to my eyes. I was literally hyperventilating and a brutal anxiety attack came on. I felt like my heart was coming out of my chest. I took my anxiety meds and I remember trembling, trying not to make noise. After about 15 minutes, I saw him come up to my door and he was standing there not moving. I was completely frozen. He stood there and suddenly walked away. He turned the lights off in his office, past my door, and I heard him walk upstairs to his bedroom. The next morning I went to get coffee and have breakfast, and there he was at the kitchen table, flipping through the paper in his usual suit. I sat down and had some coffee, and my boss talked to me like nothing had happened. I decided to go get ready and get my things together for the photo shoot. I didn't feel safe anymore for many reasons. This man ended up manipulating, grooming, and just straight up mind-screwing me for years to come. We never talked about that night, but that was the last time I ever stayed at his country house in the middle of nowhere. Also, I found the dress he was wearing and it smelled like BO and creepy old man. I threw that dress out and just buried the memory of this happening. You really had to be there to understand the magnitude of how creepy this was and how creepy he was and is. So, creepy jerk that I never want to see again. He took advantage of a young girl with talent who already had anxiety and PTSD and made it 10 times worse. I often think, what was his intention that night? This is one of the many awful experiences I had working for and with this guy. Ladies, please be careful about who you let into your life. Never be afraid to stick up for yourself. Always trust your gut and get as far away from predators and manipulative people as possible. Rest in peace to my pink dress and my sanity. I witnessed something late at night on the 4th of July that I feel the need to share. Bear with me here because I'm not a great storyteller, but I wrote down all of the events and even drew a map of where everything occurred immediately after so I would never forget. To give some context, I'm a weirdo and I spend a lot of my time hiking. I've been dealing with serious emotional and mental distress, brought on by things which are out of my control. My way of coping and finding comfort is by being a weirdo and tempting fate, by going for late night hikes. Turns out that I made the right decision by going out to the countryside late that night to enjoy the view of the full moon and see the fireflies shine deep in the woods and across the fields. I parked my car at an unmarked pull-off next to the river, which is surrounded by dense forests and unforgiving swamps. I started on my way on foot at approximately 11:30 p.m. I may or may not have had a few White Claws stuffed into my backpack, but that's beside the point. After walking for about 2.5, mostly uneventful hours, I decided it was time to double back and go find my car. This is the part where things go from I feel a bit better and more at ease to damn, what the ever-loving heck have I stumbled onto? I began crossing the bridge to get to my car, which was still roughly 3 miles to the west of where I was on the bridge at the time, when I heard footsteps on the asphalt approaching me from behind. My mood shifts to make my day. I am so ready to cut you if you even think about attacking me. I whip around and see a man wearing all black, who was much closer than what it sounded like. We make eye contact. Full moon, pretty easy to see at night, and this dude breaks into a full-ass sprint towards me, but then veers around me at the last minute. Maybe it was the liquid courage or pure adrenaline, but I yelled out to the guy, "Hey man, you good?" "Sup?" And he replies, "I gotta get to my wife." Swiftly veers around me and keeps running. I'm thinking to myself, okay, kinda weird considering it's, 12 o'clock in the middle of nowhere. But I digress. He runs out of sight. I keep walking to my car. I make it about 1.5 miles further when I hear a woman screaming, crying, and wailing. The kind that makes your hair stand up, and the kind that tells you in your gut that something is horribly wrong. I stop and listen as best as I can. Through her sobs, I hear her say, "Please, I can't take it. I don't want any more." At this point, I wanted to throw up. Her screams were coming from the same path I had to take to get to my car. I channeled the energy of the movie Tropic Thunder and went full Viet Cong, dived into the bushes, and stealthily made my way closer to see what the heck is going on and find this screaming woman. It didn't take long, because I now see the same man that ran past me earlier and a second, much larger man, also dressed in black, walking on the road coming back in my direction. The larger man had the woman slung over his shoulder like she was a sack of potatoes. She wasn't screaming anymore, but she was crying and completely incoherent. She looked like she was maybe 19 to 21 at most, with blonde hair and very small. I'd say 110 pounds or less. I popped out of the tree line and asked man number 1, "Is that your wife? Is everything okay?" He said, "Yeah, she's fine. She just can't handle her liquor." As he said this, both men continued walking past me. The woman is clearly not drunk, but appears to be drugged. She was trying to talk, but her speech was very slurred, and she could not even lift her arms or head to get out of this man's grasp. To the best of her ability, the woman keeps trying to say, "Please, no, help." She was trying so hard to lift her head and look at me and reach her arms out to me, but she was so weakened by whatever they had done to her that she was incapable of even making out a single word. Something was very wrong. Something much more than alcohol. Not 15 minutes prior, I was able to hear her screaming actual words, and now she appears barely conscious. I carry pepper gels and razor blades when I hike. However, I knew there was no way I could take on 2 men by trying my hand at some vigilante justice. I'm about 5'6" and 140 pounds, and definitely no match for 2 men twice my size. Self-preservation and survival mode kick in for me and for my fellow woman, and I say to man number 1, "Oh yeah, man, I've been there before. I'm sure she'll just sleep it off and be fine." Please understand, I only said this to him as a means of playing dumb. Again, I am not equipped to take down 2 men. The woman tries to cry and plead more as they carry her away, and I was quite honestly terrified. That sight and the connection I felt between me and the woman pleading for help is something I'll never forget. Once they were maybe 20 feet behind me, I took a glance over my shoulder to see what was happening, because the slurred cries she was letting out were nauseating. I wanted to be sure that they weren't harming her further. I see they have stopped in the road and are looking back at me. It took everything in me to be cool, act as though I didn't notice them and couldn't care less what they were up to. Again, probably call it self-preservation, or whatever you want. They began walking further away from me then. I quickened my pace to go hide behind a sloped railway track, out of their view. So I called 911. I described to the dispatcher and officer what I've just seen and that I believe that this woman was taken against her will and appeared to be drugged. The officer and dispatcher on the other line says, "Yeah, we've got 2 other calls earlier tonight. We'll go ahead and work on sending someone out." Great police work, my dudes. Keep in mind, this is one of those out in the boonies, and most people seem to think that sort of thing doesn't happen around here, even though we have an extensive number of cold cases of women and children here in this area. I'm only a mile away from my car now. Obviously, the police gave approximately 2 shits about this woman's safety. But I was so disturbed by what I saw that I knew it was time to go find these guys myself, since it seemed like no one else was going to. Side note, the amount of cigarettes I smoke in a day is roughly equivalent to the amount of toilet paper sold during this pandemic. Yeah, I was huffing a cigarette, crying silently, praying for her safety, praying they wouldn't disappear with her to who knows where and do who knows what. What I'm saying is, I freaking ran like never before to get to my car and track those men down again before they could drop out of sight with her. Obviously, I didn't personally know this woman, but I'll be damned if I don't do everything I can do to help her when she was clearly in danger and unable to help herself. I floored it to where I saw them last. Maybe 20 minutes had passed between the last time we crossed paths, and I got to my car. And much to my relief, as I rounded the corner, I saw multiple police units on scene up the road. I drove up closer just to be sure they found the right guys, and they did. They had the men up against their cruisers with their hands up and were being frisked. Paramedics were on the scene. This poor woman was lying on the ground as they were working to place her on a stretcher to get her to a hospital, I assume. The sense of relief I felt was unreal. Probably not even a fraction of the relief this woman felt when the police finally intervened. Dispatch actually called me back and advised they had not sent officers previously, as the situation described to them as a noise disturbance. Not unusual for a holiday weekend, so I cannot wholly blame them for not coming sooner, since They had not received any call specifically stating there was a woman screaming for help or being carried off caveman style against her will in the middle of nowhere in the wee hours of the night. Needless to say, I didn't sleep at all the rest of the night. I went home and cried all day, mostly out of the horror of what I saw and the awful thought of what if I hadn't taken that walk? What if no one had been there to help? What if they would have grabbed me too? So, I'll close with this. Do not be a bystander. If you see something, say something. So, I work at a pizza place. Usually inside, as my insurance does not cover claims when driving for business, but occasionally I will cover a delivery shift for one of the drivers because the money is good. Our delivery area includes a few new development upper middle class, cookie cutter neighborhoods, bad tips and older 1940s era village, average tips, 2 apartment complexes, great tips, some trailer parks, great tips or no trips, no in between, and a bunch of rural areas. Usually good tips. Not rural to the point of seeing hundreds of stars at night, but enough that you couldn't hear your neighbors yell. So, about a week ago, I was covering a delivery shift. I came back to the shop feeling pretty good. I was averaging $5 a delivery, and they had all been pretty close by, and checked to see if I had any more. I have one to an address I have never seen before. We have mostly semi-regular customers getting deliveries, so an address that doesn't seem the least bit familiar is a little odd. It's out in one of the more rural roads. I asked the kid who took the order what was up because there were special instructions on the ticket, he says. They said to go around back because the front door is not operational. I'm like, okay, that's not that uncommon. People often want you to go around back. Either they painted the door, the house shifted and it's a bitch to open, or they are just hanging out back. So as I'm driving out to the house, I get an odd feeling. I don't really like the idea of going to the back of some house out in the sticks. It would all be too easy for some thugs to order a pizza to an abandoned house. There are quite a few in the more rural areas, and then jump the delivery guy. I figure I'll scope the place out when I get there, and if it seems sketchy, just call them and make some bull up about how it's against company policy to go around the back of the house to prevent robberies. As I'm driving to the house, I realize it's towards the end of this road that gets less populated the further down you go. Great. I'm pretty near the address and driving slow. I see this house abandoned looking and set back from the roads with no address and in a bunch of trees. I think, that house better not be it. So I drive past and check the next house's address, and lo and behold, that abandoned looking one was the right one. At this point I'm not super worried though, because out in the boonies the standards of upkeep on your house are pretty low, so a house in disrepair isn't unusual. So I double back to this house and pull into the driveway. At this point I'm getting bad vibes, it doesn't feel right. I park my car at the very end of the driveway with the rear of the car on the shoulder so anybody passing by can clearly see it. At this point, I call back to the shop and tell them I'm at this sketchy house, and if I don't call back in 4 or 5 minutes, to call me, and if I don't answer, call the cops. While I am on the phone, I take a chance to take a good look at the house. It looks extremely abandoned and not just in disrepair. The driveway is crumbling, bits of gravel, and there are weeds growing out of it. There is no mailbox, no trash cans, no car or lawnmowers, no landscaping, no kids' toys. Absolutely nothing in the yard. The yard hasn't been mowed in what looks like years, really. The house is total crap. The roof is all but falling apart and the siding is falling apart. The back deck, which comes around the side, is also falling apart. The only part of the house that looks even a little bit decent is the allegedly non-functioning front door. The windows are all shut. It's 95 degrees and humid, and this place doesn't have AC. They all have the blinds or curtains shut. The few that are actually boarded up. I don't even see any wires running to this house. It's not dark but dusk, and there isn't a sign of any lights on in the house. At this point, I am starting to get pretty nervous. I am a 5'10" male, 180 pounds, not in any great shape, but I did take karate for 10 years, so I'm not completely helpless. But I do try to avoid any sort of confrontation I can, as I am mostly a pacifist. I'm not too concerned about getting robbed. No skin off my teeth. It's not my money. I mean, I would rather not get robbed, but I'm mostly worried about getting jumped or killed. It's a fairly safe area, but recently there have been some rather unsavory people moving in from the city. A big spike in home invasions and robberies, but more worrying. A few stabbings and assaults, so it's either time to nut up or shut up, and I'm not going to go in charging like a freaking fool, so I get out my phone and call the number they gave when ordering. While I'm doing that, I'm also getting the pizza out and making sure to leave my door open. A running car half in the road at an abandoned house with the door open looks suspicious, right? I figure if something goes down, it might look out of place enough to make somebody stop. Not that there is really any traffic this far down the road. I'm starting to walk up to the house while the phone's ringing. It rings twice and then an automated message comes on. It says something along the lines of this number being associated with an internet texting app. One of those free ones you download and let you send free text from a different phone number over a data connection. I think it was haywire. We have had issues with people using numbers from those services for pranks in the past. This is a pretty big red flag. My heart is now pounding in my throat and my whole body is telling me to bail. I don't want to get a reputation for being a flaky bitch as a driver and lose any future delivery shifts, and that is why I have not bailed yet. So I am just standing there holding a pizza looking at this house but not wanting to venture around to the back of it. I'm hoping that the resident will look out the window and come out by the road to get their food. So I am looking at the front windows, checking for some sign of life. I see a blind go up on the one window next to the front door and a really creepy looking guy with a hat pulled low and big sunglasses on is looking out. Remember, he is in a completely dark house surrounded by trees. At dusk, there is no reason for him to be wearing sunglasses. I also see what appears to be a big guy standing behind him in the room. This could have been anything though. When he sees me looking, he mouths something and he darts away, presumably towards the allegedly broken front door. At this point, I noped the heck out. I've stayed pretty close to my car, so it was only a few steps away, so I jumped into the driver's seat and threw the pizza into my passenger seat. Something I would never do since I am really anal about keeping my car clean. I slam it into reverse before I get the clutch all the way in, so I grind my gears a little bit. Again, something I never do. Without looking, I simultaneously slam and lock my door and floor it backwards on the main road, slipping my clutch horribly, but at this point, I don't care. I don't want to screw around and risk a stall. I didn't even check for cross traffic, which was also really stupid on my part. I start to drive away and look at the house. The screen door on the outside of the front door is now open, but the front is still shut. The guy isn't out in the yard yelling, "Wait, come back," or anything. He's just gone. So I pull over a little ways up the road to call back to the shop and tell them I'm all good, and I'll elaborate when I get back. The people never call back to inquire about their food. People usually call if their pizza is 15 minutes late here, and these people never got it, so it's really strange they didn't call. Pretty much confirming they were up to no good. After telling my coworkers about it, we conclude it was definitely a robbery at the very least, so we put the address and phone number on our no delivery list and ate their pizza. I doubt I would have actually got murdered or anything. Robbed with maybe a gun pulled or a little roughing up? Yes, but it was still very unnerving that I could have easily gotten into some serious trouble by just doing my job. Especially if the idiots picked a slightly less abandoned house to set up at. Sorry for the relatively minor incident being so long, but hey, I like to write even if I'm not that good at it. Anybody who delivers pizza, please be wary of situations like this. I looked into it, and apparently it's a pretty common way to rob pizza guys. I'm pretty glad we did not end up meeting.